When you are debugging a complex problem, you quickly end up with dozens of breakpoints scattered across your project or workspace. I would like to start this video by showing you how you can stay on top of the breakpoints in a project or workspace. The Breakpoint Navigator on the left shows you an overview of the breakpoints set in the project or workspace. The Breakpoint Navigator lists the breakpoints by scope and by file. Every breakpoint has a scope. The breakpoints in this example are linked to the workspace in which the Cloudy and the Pods projects live. We can change the scope of a breakpoint by right-clicking the breakpoint and choosing Move Breakpoint To from the menu. We have several options. We can change the scope to one of the projects of the current workspace, Cloudy or Pods. We can leave the scope local to the current workspace, or we can change the scope of the breakpoint to user. What is the scope of a breakpoint, and what does it mean to change the scope of a breakpoint? The breakpoints in this example have a workspace scope, which means that the breakpoints are defined in the workspace. This is indicated in the Breakpoint Navigator on the left. Let me show you what that means. Close the workspace and open the Cloudy project, not the workspace. If we open the Breakpoint Navigator on the left, we won't find the breakpoints we set earlier because they are tied to the workspace in which the Cloudy project lives. Close the project and open the workspace in which the Cloudy project is contained. Right-click one of the breakpoints, choose Move Breakpoint To, and choose Cloudy from the list of options. Notice that the breakpoint is no longer owned by the workspace. It is tied to the Cloudy project because we changed its scope from workspace to project. Close the workspace and open the Cloudy project one more time. If we open the Breakpoint Navigator, we see the breakpoint we moved to the Cloudy project. The idea is simple. A breakpoint is only available in the scope in which it is defined. The Cloudy project includes one breakpoint because we moved it from the workspace to the Cloudy project. It is also available in a workspace the Cloudy project is contained in. There is one other option we didn't discuss. You can move a breakpoint to a user. A breakpoint with a user scope is available in every project or workspace the source file is used in. That isn't an option you use often though. If you are debugging a problem and you want the help of a colleague, it can be useful to share one or more breakpoints. You can share a breakpoint by right-clicking the breakpoint in the Breakpoint Navigator and choosing Share Breakpoint. The Breakpoint Navigator displays shared breakpoints separately to make it clear that they are shared. Shared breakpoints are similar to shared schemes. There are several options to enable or disable a breakpoint or a collection of breakpoints. The most straightforward option is clicking the breakpoint in the gutter of the source editor. This technique also works in the Breakpoint Navigator on the left. You can also toggle breakpoints by right-clicking the file, workspace or project the breakpoint is defined in, and choosing Enable or Disable breakpoints from the menu. Earlier in this course, I showed you how to disable the breakpoints of the project or workspace. When you run the app, the debug bar shows up at the bottom. In the debug bar, the first button from the left allows you to activate or deactivate the breakpoints defined in the project or workspace. This is a convenient shortcut if you are working with breakpoints. You can delete a breakpoint one of several ways. You can drag it from the gutter of the source editor until a small delete symbol appears. That is the easiest solution most of the time. You can also right-click a breakpoint and choose Delete Breakpoint from the contextual menu. If you need to delete several breakpoints, then the Breakpoint Navigator gives you more flexibility. You can right-click a breakpoint, file or scope to delete several breakpoints. This is useful if you want to clean up the workspace or project you are working in once you have finished debugging. The ability to edit the breakpoint is a feature that is often overlooked by developers. To edit the breakpoint, right-click the breakpoint in the Breakpoint Navigator or in the gutter of the source editor and choose Edit Breakpoint. That brings up a pop-up window with several options. By default, the debugger pauses the execution of the app's process when it hits a breakpoint. Some breakpoints, however, are hit very often, and you don't want to interrupt the app's process every time the breakpoint is hit. That is where conditions come into play. A breakpoint can have a condition that defines when the breakpoint should result in the interruption of the process. Let me show you how this works. Delete the breakpoints we set earlier to start with a clean slate. Open rootviewcontroller.swift and set the breakpoint on line 218 in the Location Manager didChangeAuthorization method of the CL Location Manager delegate protocol. Let's say we want to interrupt the process if the Location Manager notifies the app that the user has denied access to its current location. We could add an if statement to the Location Manager didChangeAuthorization method, but I don't want to change the implementation for debugging an issue. A better solution is to add a condition to the breakpoint. When a breakpoint is hit, the debugger gives us access to the code that is in scope of the breakpoint's position. We can take advantage of this feature when we define a condition for the breakpoint. If that sounds confusing, then take a look at this example. Right-click the breakpoint, choose Edit Breakpoint, and enter the following condition: status equals denied. Notice that we can also take advantage of Xcode's autocompletion. A white triangle appears on the right of the breakpoint to indicate the breakpoint has been edited. Let's see if this works. Run the app. The breakpoint should not be hit if the user grants access to their current location. If we remove the app, run it again, and deny access, the breakpoint should be hit. Xcode also offers the option to ignore a breakpoint until it has been hit a set number of times. The ignore option gives you that ability. It isn't an option I use frequently, but it has several useful applications. For example, you could add a breakpoint to a section of code that you don't expect to be hit multiple times. The breakpoint acts as a warning signal in such a scenario. Let's see how we can apply this in Cloudy. The core location framework should be used sparingly, because location services can drain the battery of the device quickly. We only want to ask the core location framework for the user's location once. Let's add a breakpoint to the Location Manager didUpdateLocations method of the CL Location Manager delegate protocol. We know that the app asks for the user's location on launch, and that should be the only time it requests the user's location. As a precaution, we add a breakpoint to the Location Manager didUpdateLocations method and instruct the debugger to ignore the first hit by setting ignore to 1. The breakpoint should not be hit if we run the app. Push the app to the background and bring it back into focus. The breakpoint is hit, which means the app is requesting the user's location more than once. We can inspect the stack trace in the Debug Navigator to figure out what's causing this behavior. But we are not in log this time. The core location framework does most of its work asynchronously in the background, and the Location Manager didUpdateLocations method is invoked when the Location Manager has data to share with its delegate. The method or function that triggered the request for the user's location is no longer present in the app's stack trace. This highlights the challenges you face when you are debugging asynchronous operations. If we retrace our steps, however, we can figure out that the app asks for the user's location every time the app becomes active. That explains why the breakpoint was hit twice. You can also assign one or more actions to a breakpoint. The actions are executed when the breakpoint is hit. Xcode gives you the ability to run an AppleScript script, capture a GPU workload, execute a debugger or shell command, log a message, or play a sound. Playing a sound may seem like a gimmick, but I can assure you that it can be useful at times. I find it most useful in combination with another configuration option, automatically continuing after the breakpoint's actions have been evaluated. When I am debugging a complex issue and have dozens of breakpoints set, I don't want to step through every breakpoint. It often suffices to know that a particular piece of code is executed and sound can be more efficient than a message in the console. By checking the checkbox automatically continue after evaluating actions at the bottom, Xcode doesn't interrupt the app's process. It plays the sound and continues execution. It is important to keep in mind that breakpoints have an impact on performance. This isn't a problem in development, but remember that performance issues in development could be caused by breakpoints and their associated actions. Because we can execute arbitrary scripts when a breakpoint is hit, you can perform almost any action you want to help you debug an issue. Up until now, we have focused on file and line breakpoints. File and line breakpoints are very useful, but they are sometimes not what you need. In the next video on breakpoints, we zoom in on the other breakpoint types we briefly discussed earlier in this course.